Trump taunts Iran. Ebola cases hit 5,000. Russian strike kills 10. And Donald's wins the Florida primary. Greetings, humanity. Let's grok the news. We cover the world's headlines, but first, a deep dive into the most important story in the world today. Dateline, Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump has declared the Strait of Hormuz new United States territory and insisted the vital waterway is open and operating after all the mines were removed or detonated. In a Truth Social post, accompanied by a map marking the strait in blue, Trump stated the naval blockade of Iranian ports remains in full force and effect. He added that marine traffic is free to pass. Shipping data from analytics from Kepler shows that only about 10 vessels transited on Monday compared with the normal 130 to 140 before the conflict began. This observer will note that many vessels turn off all of their tracking in order to get through, and a lot is not being reported by these analytic firms. Also, the president is taunting Iranian rulers. Only the Democrats and the globalist news media lackeys are pretending that he is seriously claiming the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. territory. Iran's top negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, has told state media that the strait will stay closed. Well, it's not closed, they're just threatening it. But that they will continue to threaten the strait until Washington lifts its naval blockade, eases sanctions, and releases all frozen Iranian assets. Those demands were claimed to be part of an interim understanding that expired days ago. An unidentified projectile struck a ship leaving the strait near Oman early yesterday, damaging its engine room, causing a crew casualty, according to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center. The United Arab Emirates accused Iran of firing 2 ballistic missiles toward shipping in the Gulf. UAE air defenses detected 1 missile falling outside territorial waters and a second inside them. Tehran denied the charge. In response, the UAE suspended all trade, commercial exchanges, and financial transactions with Iran until further notice. Gulf oil producers, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are expanding overseas stockpiles in Japan and South Korea to hedge against further disruption. Roughly 20% of global oil supply normally passes through the strait. Measures are being taken to circumvent that, with huge pipelines being built at record pace. United States Central Command continues to enforce the blockade, redirecting commercial vessels and boarding others. The prolonged fighting has drawn American aircraft carriers and interceptor missiles from the Pacific to the Gulf, leaving the Pacific Ocean without a U.S. carrier group for only a handful of times since the 1970s. Trump has said no talks or conversations are currently underway with Iran and has threatened to strike Oman if that nation impedes efforts to force a settlement. Oman and Iran have been discussing a possible alternative transit route near Omani waters. The conflict, which began earlier this year, has already forced major adjustments in global energy flows. Saudi Aramco has resumed some commercial shipments through alternative UAE ports while still facing Houthi threats in the Red Sea. Iranian officials have warned that they will shift to a fully offensive posture if diplomacy fails. This observer wonders that other than declining drone and missile production, what Iran thinks it's going to use in this offensive. Trump has repeatedly stated that Iran cannot be allowed a nuclear weapon and has linked the Hormuz standoff to broader great power competition. European and Asian governments are monitoring the situation closely because any prolonged closure threatens energy prices and supply chains from India to Japan. American forces remain on high alert across the region. The administration maintains that the blockade is necessary to prevent Iranian aggression against commercial shipping. Iranian state media continues to reject that framing and insists the United States must meet previously agreed conditions before the waterway reopens. We did not agree to the conditions they claim we did in the talks they claim we didn't have. Shipping companies are increasingly routing vessels through a United Nations authorized path near Oman, with about 80% of recent traffic choosing that corridor. The limited number of successful transits underscores how fragile the current arrangement remains. As of this morning, the strait stays a flashpoint. Trump's declaration of territorial control, his trolling declaration of territorial control, has drawn sharp reactions from the reactors in Tehran, while the UAE trade cutoff signals rising regional isolation of Iran. Energy markets are watching every vessel movement and every statement from both capitals. The speculators are making money hand over fist. The next 48 hours could determine whether limited traffic resumes or the standoff hardens further. Trump has declared, by the way, that this is Iran's last chance. We'll see. This observer believes that the elimination of the Iranian radicals and their proxy leadership in Hamas, Hezbollah, and among the Houthis must be driven from all power by any means necessary and as quickly as possible. We know how this has to end. There is no deal with these vipers, no assurances their lying mouths can speak that anyone can believe. This must end, and this observer believes it will end the way it ended for Nazi Germany. I'm Robert Gardner, using GROK each weekday to truthfully summarize the news. And you get it with my opinions, and I make that clear. We review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. God with Us, the story of Jesus, blends the Gospels into one inspired narrative. Divided into daily Bible studies, this book presents the story of Jesus from his birth to his ascension. Find God with Us by yours truly, Robert Gardner, at Amazon.com. Now, we grok the news with headlines from around the world. Dateline: Bunia, the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Ebola outbreak in DR Congo has reached 5,021 cases and 2,378 deaths, according to government data released today. The rare Bundibugyo strain is spreading faster than response teams can contain it in Ituri province, making this the deadliest Ebola epidemic in the country's history. This observer, unfortunately, believes that at this point nothing can be done to truly contain it, and that the disease is just going to have to burn itself out. All travel from that region of the Congo must be contained and quarantined. Dateline: Kharkiv, Ukraine. A Russian rocket strike on the village of Pechenigi in northeast Ukraine killed 10 people and injured 8 early yesterday, according to the regional governor. The attack hit homes and shops as part of an overnight barrage of 147 drones. United Nations figures show 437 Ukrainian civilians died in July, and that's a 70% rise from the same month last year. Dateline: Kiev, Ukraine. Former Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov has called for national elections despite the ongoing war, and he warns of a governance crisis. Ukrainian anti-corruption agencies are investigating senior officials in President Volodymyr Zelensky's office 1 day after Fedorov's ouster and the earlier dismissal of a deputy presidential official and other cabinet shakeups in a nation that is sick and tired of the European-backed war. It seems like the UK and the EU are willing to fight Putin to the very last Ukrainian, and they almost have. Dateline: Orlando, Florida. United States Representative Byron Donalds won the Republican nomination for Florida governor yesterday, setting up a November contest against Democrat David Jolly to succeed Ron DeSantis. Progressive Angie Nixon scored an upset victory in the Democratic Senate primary and will face Republican Senator Ashley Moody in the fall. Dateline: Juneau, Alaska. Republican Senator Dan Sullivan and Democratic former Representative Mary Pelota have advanced from Tuesday's primary to face each other in the general election for Alaska's United States Senate seat. Both candidates immediately began campaigning after the results were certified. Unfortunately, Senator Lisa Murkowski, of course, remains in office. Dateline: Damascus, Syria. Israel struck an airbase in northwest Syria early Tuesday, saying that the operation aimed to prevent Turkish troops from deploying there. Turkey rejected the claim as lacking seriousness and accused Israel of violating Syrian sovereignty and territorial integrity. Dateline, Washington, D.C. President Trump has announced a last-minute deal with Canada, delaying 50% tariffs on Canadian imports that were set to take effect after midnight Tuesday. The agreement covers roughly $20 billion in goods, and it averts an immediate trade confrontation. It amazes this observer how hostile the progressive, liberal, globalist Canadian government has become toward the United States, their biggest trading partner and closest friend. Dateline, Oakland, California. Opening arguments began yesterday in a federal trial brought by 4 states accusing Meta platforms of knowingly designing Instagram and Facebook to addict children. Meta has called the allegations wildly out of proportion. As a senior citizen, this observer can tell you it's addicting to seniors, too. Dateline, Bragança, Portugal. More than 2,000 firefighters remain deployed against multiple wildfires, including a blaze in northeast Portugal that has already burned over 2,000 hectares since Saturday. 3 significant fires were still active Tuesday morning. Dateline, Indianapolis, Indiana. Historic flooding across more than 50 countries from Lake Michigan to the Ohio River has killed 7 people and displaced over 1,000 residents. President Trump approved an emergency declaration Saturday to speed federal relief. Dateline, Kabul, Afghanistan. A grenade explosion near a school complex in the Afghan capital wounded at least 42 children, according to the United Nations. The blast occurred Tuesday in a densely populated residential area. Dateline, Ranchi, India. The Jharkhand government canceled 44 recruitment examinations yesterday evening, citing irregularities after student protests. The canceled test covered posts including civil judges, assistant engineers, and forest range officers. Dateline, New Delhi, India. India's Supreme Court yesterday invoked Article 142 to quash first information reports filed against students who protested nationwide over the NEET UG examination paper leaks. The ruling follows the earlier resignation of the education minister. This observer finds that the people of India are just as brilliant, just as dedicated, have just as much honor as anyone else on the planet, and the cheating has got to stop, and confidence in the exams must be restored. It's not too much to ask. Dateline, Granada, Spain. A magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck southern Spain yesterday morning, injuring 3 people, including a minor, and sending debris into the streets. The quake followed a stronger tremor 3 days earlier in the same region. Dateline, Seoul, South Korea. South Korean officials are debating whether to develop an independent nuclear arsenal as President Trump reduces joint military drills and seeks renewed talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Trump has cited his personal relationship with Kim as a reason for the scale back. I've got to teach GROK to somehow stop believing leftist media framing, but that's why I keep my hands on the wheel. Trump also, more importantly, cited Korea's refusal to help in the war on Iran, even though they themselves are dependent on the oil that must move through the Strait of Hormuz. Dateline, Taipei, Taiwan. Chinese Coast Guard vessels continue law enforcement patrols and hydrographic surveys in waters east of Taiwan, prompting formal concerns from the United States, Britain, France, and Germany about freedom of navigation and regional stability. China insists the activities are lawful. Dateline, Itanagar, India. A fact-finding team of Indian politicians reported that Chinese forces have blocked access to key patrolling points and encroached on territory in Arunachal Pradesh's Upper Subansiri district. Beijing described the overall border situation as generally stable. Dateline, The Hague, Netherlands. The International Criminal Court criticized new United States sanctions on its president and the senior prosecution lawyer, calling the measures a flagrant attack on the court's independence. The sanctions were announced earlier this week in Washington. This observer will tell you that this European globalist kangaroo court has no legitimacy and no authority over America and our citizens. The very existence of this so-called court and their declarations are violations of the sovereignty of every nation on earth, and the justices and the unelected European Union bureaucrats who empower it should be treated as hostiles, as enemies of the free people of the world. And I thank you for listening. Please join me tomorrow to once again GROK the News. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.